Section 1. The solitude of the awakened mind. There comes a point in every person's life where silence begins to speak louder than words, a point where the noise of the world becomes unbearable, not because it's loud, but because it's hollow. You start to see through things, through people, through conversations, through the illusions that once kept you entertained. And that's when it begins. That separation. The quiet disconnection between you and the life you once fit perfectly into. Alan Watts once said, "Waking up to who you are requires letting go of who you imagine yourself to be." But what he didn't say is that letting go of that false self also means letting go of many people who were attached to it. When you become spiritually awake, you stop playing the roles that kept others comfortable. You no longer nod in agreement to lies. You no longer participate in meaningless gossip. You no longer pretend to enjoy things that drain your soul. Begin to crave authenticity the way a drowning man craves air. And authenticity makes people uncomfortable, not because you're rude or distant, but because your presence exposes their pretenses. The spiritually awake are like mirrors. When people look at you, they don't just see you, they see themselves. Their insecurities, their unhealed wounds, their hidden shadows. Everything they try to avoid suddenly becomes visible in your silence. That's why awakening is lonely. You're not lonely because you have no friends. You're lonely because the old world no longer feels real. You begin to see how much of human interaction is just performance, how most people don't want connection, they want validation. How they don't want truth, they want comfort. And truth, once awakened in you, refuses to be silenced again. You stop chasing people because you realize, if someone cannot meet you in depth, you will drown in their shallowness. And so, you walk alone. Not because you're bitter, but because you value peace more than company. Not because you think you're better, but because you've outgrown the need to prove yourself. You realize that energy is sacred, and where you place it determines the quality of your entire life. In the realm of dark psychology, this is called energetic withdrawal, the stage where an individual detaches from toxic social conditioning. When you begin to see patterns in people, your empathy sharpens, but your tolerance diminishes, because empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. And when you awaken, you no longer confuse attachment for love, or attention for connection. You begin to choose stillness over stimulation, growth over gossip, truth over belonging. But here's the paradox. The more you awaken, the more you love humanity, yet the fewer humans you can comfortably be around. Because once you taste real consciousness, small talk feels like a starvation diet. And this is the silent price of awakening. The world calls it isolation, but in reality, it's transformation. You are shedding illusions, you are dissolving false friendships, you are making room for truth. And that process is not glamorous, it's quiet, it's lonely, it's liberating. You will outgrow people you once laughed with, activities you once enjoyed, and identities you once swore by. But that's the hidden grace of awakening. To lose the false is to gain the real, Alan Watts said. You are an aperture through which the universe is looking at and exploring itself. And sometimes, the universe must close a few doors to open the right ones. Section 2. The psychology of isolation. How awareness changes human connection. There's a strange and quiet shift that happens once your eyes open. You don't choose to be distant. You simply lose interest in the superficial. You start seeing the invisible strings behind human behavior, and that changes everything. Psychology calls it emotional pattern recognition. It's when your awareness becomes so sharp that you can sense motives, see manipulation, and feel hidden tension without a single word being spoken. You notice how people talk about others more than they talk about ideas. You see how they fish for validation with carefully crafted humility. You feel how energy changes in the room when you refuse to play the game. And so you start speaking less, not because you have nothing to say, but because you realize words are wasted on the unready. Alan Watts once said, "Trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth." Most people don't know who they are. They only know who they pretend to be. And when you stop pretending, you disrupt the illusion. People will begin to say you've changed, that you've become cold, detached, maybe even arrogant. But what they really mean is, you've stopped feeding their need for control. You've stopped conforming to their emotional script. Spiritual awakening rewires the brain. You move from reaction to Reflection. You stop living on autopilot, and that threatens those still asleep. In dark psychology, the ego is the ultimate manipulator. It fears exposure, it fears silence, it fears people who can see through it. And when you become awake, you start to see egos everywhere, layered under kindness, buried beneath smiles, disguised as care. So you withdraw, not because you dislike people, but because you can finally see them. The illusion of friendship breaks when you realize how much of it was built on convenience, habit, or shared trauma. You start noticing how often you were the listener, the fixer, the healer, and how rarely anyone asked, "How are you?" Really, you see that most friendships were transactions, not connections, a trade between loneliness and validation. And once you become conscious of that pattern, you can't go back. The awakened mind cannot unsee manipulation, cannot unknow hypocrisy, cannot unhear the truth echoing behind every word. So yes, you will become more alone. That solitude to the awake is not punishment, it's purification. You are cleansing yourself from energetic noise, from psychic debris, from people who only come to feed on your light. Alan Watts compared this stage to the shedding of skin. He said, "You are under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago." That's not philosophy, that's a declaration of freedom. Because when you stop clinging to the old, you make room for what's real. In this solitude, you begin to understand something profound. Loneliness is not the absence of people, it's the absence of understanding. And solitude, when chosen consciously, becomes a weapon of growth. You learn to sit with your thoughts without needing distraction. You learn to face your pain without running. You learn to enjoy your own company because you are no longer escaping yourself. Most people fear silence because silence reveals truth, but you begin to crave it because silence is where your soul finally speaks, and it says, "This peace you feel in isolation, that's not loneliness, that's alignment." So the friends disappear, yes, but so does the need to fill the void they left behind, because once you realize you are the energy holding everything together, you stop chasing what was never meant to stay. Section 3. The spiritual law of vibration. Why energy rejection is protection. There is an unspoken law that governs all human relationships. The law of vibration. Everything in existence vibrates. Every thought, every emotion, every word, every person. And when your vibration changes, your world does too. When you awaken spiritually, your energy begins to rise. You vibrate at a higher frequency. Clear, aware. And those who still dwell in chaos can no longer meet you there. It's not personal, it's physics. You don't lose friends when you grow. You simply stop vibrating at the same level. The frequencies that once matched your wounds no longer resonate with your healing. The conversations that once fed your ego now starve your soul. And that's why spiritually awake people often feel misunderstood or alienated. Alan Watts once said, "The more you try to be real, the more unreal the world becomes." And it's true. When you become authentic in a world built on illusion, you start to feel like a foreigner in your own life. You start noticing how many relationships are rooted in unspoken contracts. I'll pretend to be who you need me to be, as long as you pretend I'm the person I wish I was. But once your vibration rises, those contracts burn away. You begin to crave something deeper, conversations that nourish you, people who challenge your growth, environments that don't drain your soul. You no longer tolerate low vibrational habits like gossip, complaining, or comparison, because you understand that energy is contagious. Dark psychology teaches that the human mind seeks familiarity over peace. That's why people cling to toxic friendships, because chaos feels comfortable. But the awakened, they choose alignment over attachment. You stop explaining yourself. You stop defending your peace. You stop trying to prove your worth to people who can't feel it. And that's when you notice something profound. Your silence begins to intimidate those who thrive on noise. Your calm becomes threatening to those who feed on chaos. Your peace becomes power. When your energy evolves, rejection becomes redirection. Life starts removing people not as punishment, but as protection. It's not that they were evil, it's that their vibration no longer fits the frequency of your future. Alan Watts described this as the cosmic dance, the eternal rhythm of attraction and separation. He said, "You are something the whole universe is doing, in the same way that a wave is something the whole ocean is doing." And sometimes, the ocean pulls back, not to abandon the wave, but to prepare it for a greater rise. That's what rejection really is, a spiritual current, redirecting your energy toward alignment. When people leave, when friends fade, when circles shrank, it's not lost that it's evolution. The universe is clearing space for new frequencies. But here's where most people get stuck. They resist the change. They chase what's leaving, grieve what's gone, and wonder why their peace dissolves in the process. The truth is, not everyone is meant to walk every chapter with you. Some people are lessons, disguised as love. Some are mirrors reflecting your old self. Some are reminders of how far you've come. The spiritually awake understand this. They stop mourning endings and start respecting transitions, because endings are sacred. Endings mean rebirth, and rebirth requires solitude. Alan Watts said, "To resist change, to try to cling to life, is like holding your breath. You suffocate. So you exhale, you let go. You allow life to shift, because you understand that real power doesn't come from holding on. It comes from trusting that whatever leaves is making space for what must arrive." This is the hidden mastery of awakening. To love deeply, but not cling. To give fully, but not depend. To walk alone, but never feel lonely. Because when your vibration rises high enough, you realize you were never losing friends. You were shedding versions of yourself that no longer needed them. Section 4. The Mirror Effect. How awareness changes the way others see you. Deeper you go into awareness, the more you become a mirror, not just to yourself, but to everyone around you. People can't truly see you. They only see their reflection in you. And the more conscious you become, the clearer that reflection gets. This is why spiritually awake people often trigger others. Without saying a word, you walk into a room, and the energy shifts. Someone who's hiding something suddenly becomes defensive. Someone who's wearing a mask feels exposed. Someone who's built their identity on illusion starts to crumble. Alan Watts said, "When you get the message, you hang up the phone." But most people never get the message. They stay trapped in the static. They confuse identity for self, and validation for love. When you awaken, you no longer participate in that illusion, and your detachment feels like rejection to them. Dark psychology reveals that the human ego cannot stand being unseen. It feeds on attention, control, and emotional reactions. So when you stop giving it those things, it fights back. People may start labeling you. They'll call you distant, cold, too serious, too spiritual, too strange. But what they're really saying is, "I can't manipulate you anymore." You see, the mirror effect is uncomfortable because it forces people to confront what they hide from themselves. Your presence becomes a truth serum. You don't even have to speak. Your silence says everything. That silence exposes their noise. The spiritually awake don't try to change others. They don't preach. They don't argue, because they know everyone sees only from their level of consciousness, and trying to wake someone who's deeply asleep will only drain your light. Instead, they embody truth quietly. They let their calm speak louder than their words. They live in a way that subtly whispers, "There is another way to exist." And that's what makes them powerful and lonely, because people aren't drawn to truth. They're drawn to comfort. They don't want mirrors. They want masks. They want to be told they're fine, that they don't need to change, that their pain is someone else's fault. But an awakened person can't give them that lie anymore. You stop rescuing people who choose their suffering. You stop trying to convince them of your worth. You stop seeking to belong to places your soul has outgrown. Because you realize your light is not for everyone. It was never meant to be. Alan Watts once compared the human experience to a dream. He said, "We are the eyes of the universe looking at itself." And what you realize as you awaken is, most people are terrified of seeing themselves. So, when they look into your eyes and see the truth reflected back, they turn away. They don't hate you, they fear what you represent. You remind them of the person they could be, the freedom they're afraid to claim, the peace they haven't earned yet. And that's why spiritually awake people have few friends, not because they can't connect, but because they can't pretend. You can't go back to shallow waters once you've tasted the ocean. You can't unlearn what awareness has shown you. Dark psychology calls this cognitive dissonance, the discomfort that arises when truth collides with illusion. And when people feel that around you, they'll either evolve or escape. They'll either rise to meet your energy or reject it entirely. But the wise don't chase. They know that when someone pulls away, it's not rejection, it's resonance. You no longer vibrate at the same frequency, and that's okay. Because friendship, like everything else, is an exchange of energy. Then when your energy becomes pure, your circle must become smaller, not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. The mirror doesn't apologize for reflecting the truth, and the awakened don't apologize for their peace. So let people fall away. Let silence replace small talk. Let solitude replace fake company, because one authentic connection in truth is worth more than 1,000 in illusion. And remember, you are not being abandoned, you are being refined. Section 5. The freedom of solitude. Living peacefully in a world of illusion. There comes a point when solitude stops feeling like loneliness and starts feeling like power. The spiritually awake eventually realize peace isn't something you find in others, it's something you create within yourself and protect with silence. Alan Watts said, "You are the universe experiencing itself." And once you understand that, you stop seeking completion in other people. Because how can the universe be incomplete? How can something infinite ever be lonely? You begin to see that the very search for belonging was born from illusion, the illusion that you were ever separate from the world around you. But awakening dissolves that illusion, reveals that everything you were chasing in others' love, validation, meaning was already inside you. That realization changes how you live. You stop trying to fill empty conversations. You stop forcing friendships that no longer breathe. You stop measuring your worth by how many people surround you. Start enjoying the quiet things, the sound of rain, the taste of stillness, the freedom of not explaining yourself to anyone. Start loving your own company, because your company is finally honest. You no longer betray your truth to fit in. You no longer shrink your light to make others comfortable. You no longer wait for someone to understand your silence, because you've understood it yourself. Dark psychology teaches that most humans fear abandonment more than they fear pain. That's why they stay in fake friendships, toxic circles, and shallow patterns, because emptiness feels safer than solitude. But the awakened understand a deeper truth. Solitude isn't emptiness, it's expansion. It's the sacred space where you meet your higher self. It's where clarity is born, where creativity flows, where the noise of the world fades, and the voice of the soul finally speaks. In solitude, you begin to see life as it truly is, a cosmic game of mirrors, a series of awakenings disguised as losses. Alan Watts once said, "Man suffers only because he takes seriously what the gods made for fun." And when you awaken, you stop taking the world so seriously. You stop trying to control outcomes. You stop being addicted to drama. You start laughing more, not because life gets easier, but because you see the grand design behind it all. Realize that the world is not against you. It's teaching you. Every betrayal taught you boundaries. Every rejection taught you self-worth. Every period of isolation taught you presence. You learn that the friends who left were never meant to stay. They were messengers, not companions. Their departure was part of your evolution. Their absence created the silence. You needed to hear yourself again. You stop mourning what left and start honoring what stayed. Your strength, your awareness, your peace. And from that peace, something incredible happens. You begin to attract differently. Your energy shifts. You start drawing in people who are awake, like you rare souls who don't drain your spirit, who don't need your light but match it. These are not just friends. They are reflections of your higher vibration. You recognize them instantly, not by appearance, but by presence. There's no competition, no pretense, no masks. Just truth. Just flow. Just peace. That's the reward for walking through the valley of solitude. You emerge untouched, untangled, unafraid, and your energy becomes untouchable. The world can no longer trigger you because you see through it. Anger can no longer control you because you understand it. Loneliness can no longer haunt you because you've befriended yourself. You become a silent storm, calm on the surface, but infinitely deep beneath. You no longer seek validation. You no longer chase belonging. You simply are, and that being radiates power, the kind of power that doesn't need to be seen to be felt. Alan Watts once said, "The meaning of life is just to be alive." It is so plain and so obvious and so simple, but people panic as though it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. That's the final illusion, that idea that peace lies elsewhere. It doesn't. It's here, it's now. in the silence you once called loneliness. And so, the spiritually awake don't have many friends, but they don't need many, because they've realized the ultimate truth. The fewer the voices around you, the clearer the voice within becomes. If this message spoke to your soul, then remember, awareness isn't about becoming superior, it's about becoming real.